F4W. Number 341, Nagata destroyed I in 21 seconds at Inoki show, January 7, 2002 by Observer staff. F4W number 341, Nagata destroyed in 21 seconds at Inoki show, January 7, 2002. Yuji Nagata, New Japan's best worker and hottest rising star, was destroyed in 21 seconds by K1 fighter Mirko Crocop in what can only be described as a complete disaster in the semi-main event of Antonio Inoki's New Year's Eve show at the Saitama Super Arena. The show, which somehow managed to pack 35,492 fans into a building which normally seats around 27,000, was built around New Japan wrestlers facing off against K1 fighters in a series of legitimate mixed matches. The theory was simple: New Japan guys, with their knowledge of submissions, would take down the K1 kickboxers, who had maybe a month of real submission training, and then beat them. Of course, anyone who follows the mixed martial arts knows that pretty much anything can happen in a real fight. And, unfortunately for Nagata, the worst possible thing happened. The company made a huge gamble putting Nagata, 33, a 1992 national champion in Greco-Roman wrestling who had never done a legitimate shoot in his life, in the ring with accomplished K1 fighter Mirko Crocop, Mirko Filipovic. Crocop had previously beaten IWGP champion Kazuyuki Fujita in what could only be described as a total fluke. Fujita shot in for a takedown and Crocop kicked him right in the head. While Fujita was able to easily shake off the blow and go to work on Crocop on the mat, he ended up suffering one of the most ghastly cuts in history and the referee was forced to stop it. Since Fujita looked to be handily in control when the fight was stopped, his career wasn't damaged and he actually came out of it perhaps looking stronger than before. He shook off a kick that might have killed most men thanks to a freaky thick forehead. Fujita, an accomplished amateur and former New Japan preliminary wrestler, became a main eventer and IWGP champion solely based on his accomplishments and pride. He lucked his way into victories over Mark Kerr, Mark Coleman, and Ken Shamrock, and the rest was history. Tadao Yasuda, a 38-year-old former sumo-turned-horrible New Japan wrestler, also made his pro wrestling name by lucking his way into a decision win over Masaki Sadake in one of the most boring fights in history. Unfortunately, those who have not fared well in pride have suffered greatly as a result. Tokumitsu Ishizawa, then wrestling under a mask as Kendo Kashin, was one of New Japan's best junior heavyweight wrestlers, whose gimmick was that he was a submission expert. Unfortunately, he lost a pride match on August 27, 2000 to Ryan Gracie, and at that point his wrestling career nearly died. The loss having exposed his submission gimmick as a fraud, he was booked to lose match after match for almost an entire year. Finally, a rematch was signed, and his career had slid so far downhill that he stated point blank that if he didn't win, he was retiring from wrestling and fighting forever. Whether he was telling the truth or not we'll never know, because Gracie popped a rib during the fight and Kashin scored his big win. Literally weeks later, he won the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title and his career was rehabilitated. So, whether you agree with the concept or not, the fact is that success or failure in pride has a lot to do with a person's future as a pro wrestler in New Japan. Although the pro wrestlers won the majority of the fights New Year's Eve, everyone knew they lost the big one. The Nagata fight had so much riding on it. He was going for revenge against Crocop, the man who defeated New Japan's heavyweight champion in their last fight. He was coming off winning this year's G1 Climax tournament and looked to be the man the company was going to build around in 2002. He was set to headline the January 4th Tokyo Dome show against Noah's GHC champion Jun Akiyama. And he lost. What is sad is that Fujita, Yasuda and Ishizawa were undercard wrestlers who gained stardom by winning real fights. Nagata, however, wasn't an undercard guy with little or nothing to lose. He was already a superstar and thus had a lot to gain with a win, but absolutely everything to lose with a defeat. It's too early to determine what the ramifications are going to be, but we'll know a lot more after his Tokyo Dome match. Nagata, who knew the company was counting on him to win, was said to have fallen into deep depression after the show. Fans of New Japan will be falling into an equally deep depression soon as Yasuda, one of the most boring wrestlers in the entire company, won his fight against the very menacing 6'4", 273-pound Jerome LeBanner and became a huge media celebrity as a result. There is already talk of giving him the IWGP Championship in the tournament scheduled for next month. Fujita was stripped of the title after suffering a torn Achilles tendon last month. Complete results of the show, which aired as a live New Year's Eve TV special, are as follows. 1. Nobuhiko Takada, 0523, I invented a fourth column for worked fights, went to a draw with Mike Bernardo. 001, in 3 3-minute rounds. Takada somehow got his fight reduced to 3 rounds from the usual 5. Because of his bad foot. Actually, when he was told he had to fight Sam Greco, his foot became so bad that he said he couldn't fight at all. Then, when he was informed that Greco was being replaced by Mike Bernardo, who has never done any ground training in his life, the foot got better. They did absolutely nothing the first round with the exception of Takada throwing a few kicks. Second round was much of the same, although Bernardo did manage to floor him with a kick late in the round. They did absolutely nothing in the third round either. This was the second Takada fight in a row that ended with the crowd booing vociferously. Takada announced after the match that he was retiring from fighting for good. Write that one down. Actually, I hope he's telling the truth, but write it down anyway. 2. Masaki Sadake 161 went to a draw with Sam Greco 0-0-1 after 5 3-minute rounds. These two were former K1 rivals. Said to be a good fight. Greco, who made a handful of appearances in World Championship Wrestling, has done quite a bit of ground training recently. It appears New Japan is looking to bring him in, and they might book a match between him and Nagata later in the year to try to save what's left of Nagata's career. 3. Gary Goodridge 15-13-1 went to a draw with Ebenezer Fontes Braga 8-5-2 after 5 3-minute rounds. Perhaps you are seeing a pattern develop. 4. Tokumitsu Ishizawa 1-1-1 went to a draw with Shingo Koyasu 0-0-1 after 5 3-minute rounds. It is said that had this gone to the judges, Ishizawa would have won handily. There were people internally who were disappointed in him for not being able to submit Koyasu, but it doesn't appear his standing in the company was hurt in any way. 5. Antonio Inoki and Great Sasuke beat Giant Silva and A Mystery Man Tilda, not Rick Steiner, in 4-0-2. This was a special unannounced match. Reportedly, the fans loved it, which is hardly surprising because A. Inoki was involved, and B. they just sat through 4 straight draws. Inoki wore his shirt during the match, which indicates he decided at the very last minute to put this on the show. He beat the masked guy with his octopus hold. That Inoki is really damn smart, because this will probably end up being the best match on the show. 6. Don Frye 12-1-0 beat Cyril Abidi 0-1-0 in 34 seconds of the second round with a choke sleeper. Frye 36 was coming off a torn quad. Not as bad as Hunter's and is one tough dude. Abidi's eye was massacred in the fight and he was said to be devastated about the loss. 7. Mirko Krokop 2-0-1 beat Yuji Nagata 0-1-0 in 21 seconds via knockout. Krokop caught him with a kick coming in and then started pounding on him in the mount until the referee stopped it. And the New Japan fans wept. 8. Tadao Yasuda 2-1-0 beat Jerome LeBanner 0-1-0 in 2:10 of the second round with a guillotine choke. So not only did he win, but he was pro wrestling savior after the destruction in the previous fight as well. Crowd went hoss for him afterwards and the TV announcers put him over like he was God. And the New Japan fans wept. Rings folds. I guess it shouldn't come as a surprise that the year 2001 couldn't end without one more wrestling company closing its doors forever. In a surprise to virtually nobody, it was officially announced last week that the Japanese Rings promotion would be folding following their February 25th World Grand Prix tournament at Yokohama Bunka Gym. The similarities between the death of this promotion and the death of WCW and ECW are many. Like ECW, Rings had become a farm system for the Pride organization. Both companies promote mixed martial arts events, although it wasn't until late 1999 that Rings became pure shoot. Pride, like the WWF, has a tremendous amount of money behind them and over the past year began rating Rings talent. As a result, the marketability of the Rings cards began to suffer, although the fights were still some of the best in the world, and, more importantly, the promotion came off as minor league in the eyes of casual fans. Due in part to these problems, the television network WOWOW, which helped support the promotion while at the same time providing television, opted to cut their funding last March. Of course, this resulted in another exodus of talent from the company, leaving them with no native stars other than Horomitsu Kanehara and Tsuyoshi Kosaka. The death blow to the company was shockingly similar to the death blow of WCW. WOWOW announced that, effective March 2002, they were canceling the television show. The story of Rings and its founder, Akira Maeda, actually begins way back in 1983. In August of that year, several wrestlers, including Satoru Sayama, who had become a superstar as the original Tiger Mask, attempted to take over New Japan Pro Wrestling from within. Sayama was fired and, during the subsequent investigations, it was learned that Antonio Inoki had been funneling money out of the company to support his own failing non-wrestling business ventures, none of which, for the record, was a football league. Inoki blamed it all on business partner Hisashi Shinma and got away with it. Shinma was fired. He, along with former New Japan wrestlers Yoshiaki Fujiwara, whom the Fujiwara armbar is named after, Sayama and Nobuhiko Takada, decided to get revenge on Inoki by starting a rival pro wrestling company, to be called the UWF, Universal Wrestling Federation. Shinma chose to headline with Akira Maeda, a former karate star who was working at the time for the World Wrestling Federation. At the time, Shinma and the WWF were on good terms. In fact, he was the figurehead WWF president before Jack Tunney came along, so Maeda actually won the UWF International title in a match with Pierre Lebrev at Madison Square Garden. Unfortunately, the WWF/Shinma relationship fell apart soon after, and as a result the WWF forced Maeda to do jobs to everybody on the way out, including George the Animal Steele. Maeda finally returned to Japan and, bitter about his treatment in the WWF and wanting to find some way to keep Americans out of his company, decided to create a brand new style of wrestling, strong style, a worked shoot built around realistic grappling and submissions. The promotion became wildly popular in Tokyo, with Maeda and company claiming their style was real while traditional pro wrestling was fake. Unfortunately, the group didn't have TV exposure. Sound familiar? Which hurt its ability to gain mainstream credibility. On September 2, 1985, Maeda double-crossed Sayama in a match, kicking him repeatedly in the testicles and causing the bout to fall apart. He was fired immediately afterwards, and the following month Sayama gave his notice as well. Shortly thereafter, the company folded. Most of the guys returned to New Japan with the exception of Sayama, who decided to go off and pursue real martial arts. An Inoki vs. Maeda dream match was quickly signed. Of course, Inoki's idea was to squash Maeda and destroy his so-called real wrestling in the process. Maeda would have none of it, and when neither side could agree on a finish, the dream match was turned into a very nightmarish 10-man tag. Maeda had other problems too, not the least of which was a match with Andre the Giant that went horribly wrong, resulting in both guys refusing to work with each other and Maeda chopping Andre down with several hard kicks to the legs. Despite the problems, Maeda kept his job. For the next year or so, Inoki continued to book matches between the former UWF shooters and the wrestlers, which were well received by the hardcore fans but not necessarily by the casual audience. Ratings fell and New Japan TV was moved from their prized primetime slot to a late evening hour. During this period, Maeda became frustrated with Inoki's refusal to pass the torch to him, so on November 27, 1987, he took matters into his own hands. During a 6-man tag at Korakuen Hall, Maeda threw one of the most legendary cheap shots in history, a hard kick to Riki Choshu's unprotected face which shattered his orbital bone. Management went crazy and told Maeda he had two choices, go to Mexico for a while and then return to put it over Choshu or hit the bricks. He chose the latter and, along with Nobuhiko Takada, went off to reform the UWF. This time the promotion in its strong style was debuting after 2 years of exposure on New Japan TV. It quickly became a sensation and, in the next 2 years, sold out every single show with the exception of one. Their November 29, 1989 U Cosmos show at the Tokyo Dome sold 40,000 tickets the first day and became the first pro wrestling event in history to sell out the Dome. The promotion took a page out of Inoki's own playbook with Maeda facing and defeating a series of fighters from other martial arts including Gerard Gordeau. Unfortunately, every great empire must ultimately come to an end, and the second UWF died in early 1990, a victim of serious financial mismanagement, another familiar story. The main players all split off and formed new groups of their own. Fujiwara, Masakatsu Funaki, Minoru Suzuki, Yusuke Fuke and Bart Valley created PWFG, Professional Wrestling Fujiwara Gumi, which later evolved into Pancrase. Takada formed Union of Wrestling Force International, UWFI, which became the first to really take off, and also became the losing half of the single most successful promotion versus promotion feud in the history of wrestling with New Japan a few years later, and Maeda formed Rings. Of the two shoot-style promotions which survived, Pancrase, created after PWFG's demise by Funaki Suzuki, Ken Shamrock and Masami Ozaki, became the first to promote legitimate shooting matches. In the early days, the undercard matches were almost entirely shoot while some of the headline matches were worked. Shamrock gained his first real fame as a shoot fighter for Pancrase, winning their heavyweight title and bringing legitimacy to the company by simultaneously competing in the UFC, which was created just 2 months after Pancrase's debut show. Rings, while doing worked matches longer, was actually formed 2 years earlier, in May of 1991. It remains the only promotion in the world that began promoting completely worked matches and ended up promoting only shoots. Unfortunately, that decision was among the many reasons for its eventual demise. As noted earlier, despite promoting a great product, they were, like ECW, too small to compete with a bigger company and too big to survive without marquee names. As Maeda grew older, attempts were made to create new stars, among them Kosuke and Kiyoshi Tamura, who might have been the single greatest technical pro wrestler in the history of the world. Unfortunately, no matter how great their matches were, and there were some great ones, particularly a Kosuke vs. Tamura match on June 27, 1998 that might have been the greatest technical match I've ever seen, or how many wins they were given, nobody was able to replace Maeda in the eyes of the fans. Everything was fine as long as the matches remained worked. But unfortunately, as the decade of the 90s wore on, the worked shoot style became passé as the real thing became more commonplace and accessible. Once the decision was made to become a completely shoot organization, the shelf life of the top stars and drawing cards began to shorten considerably. While the ring's fighters more than held their own in the real world of MMA, Tamura in particular beat such luminaries as Renzo Gracie, Maurice Smith, Pat Militic, Dave Mena, Jeremy Horn, and Elvis Sanosik, plus went to a 30-minute draw with Frank Shamrock in a match Shamrock privately claimed was one of his toughest fights ever. Many of them, particularly Tamura, took considerable beatings in the process. Unlike worked pro wrestling, real shooters can't be successful for the 3, 5 or 10 years it takes to make them into superstar draws. By the time they really start to get over, they're usually past their prime, and at that point the losses start adding up and their drawing power wanes. As a result, it is far more important in shooting to create new stars every year or two. Unfortunately, Rings was unable to do that. Whenever they did happen upon someone really talented, Pride snatched them up. The most recent acquisition was Gilbert Yvel, who jumped to Pride almost immediately after winning the Rings world title. Rings is probably most famous for promoting Alexander Karalin's only professional wrestling bout, a worked victory over Maeda in Maeda's retirement match on February 21, 1999. The show, which drew a $2.5 million gate and 17,048 fans to the Yokohama Arena, was big enough to gain mainstream press not only in Japan, but in American publications such as the New York Times and Sports Illustrated as well. Karelin, who had experience fighting in the Russian Sambo Championships, claimed in a press conference that he chose this match over all the others he'd been offered over the years because he was born in Novosibirsk, Russia, which is technically a part of Asia and thus makes him part Asian, and therefore he was accepting the challenge of another Asian who had approached him. I am not making this answer up. I am also not making up the fact that they also asked him if he'd perform harakiri, suicide by sword, if he disgraced Greco-Roman wrestling by losing. When they asked if he had any intentions of doing future MMA matches, he said, "If I perform harakiri, I won't continue." The match was fought under Rings rules, which meant 2 5-minute rounds. The match could end as the result of a knockout, TKO, submission or decision. Points were lost for rope breaks, no closed fists to the face or to a prone opponent were allowed, and no biting, eye gouging or attacking the testicles. Karelin dominated the match, although he lost 1 point for a rope break. He destroyed Maeda with his Karelin lift. Maeda got 2 rope breaks in the second round, so Karelin won the match by a 2-1 decision. Afterwards, he said from that point forward he would focus solely on the Sydney Olympics. It pains me to mention this, but as it turns out, he didn't focus quite enough. Mike Davis passes away. Longtime journeyman wrestler Mike Davis passed away at approximately 10:30 p.m. Christmas night of an apparent heart attack at his home near Dallas. Davis, 46, had always kept himself in very good shape, although his family did have a history of heart problems. He passed away only a few minutes after first complaining to his wife about feeling ill. Davis began training with Lars Anderson and Vince Castelli in the late 70s after graduating from Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina. He wrestled his first match for the Universal Wrestling Alliance in 1979. Shortly thereafter, he left to go to work for Georgia Championship Wrestling, where he continued his training under Gene and Ole Anderson, Assassin and Mr. Wrestling 2. Davis, while having a fine physique, was never really a big man. Early on, he developed a methodical ring style, much like a younger Jake Roberts. His first televised match was against the Masked Superstar, at the time a big draw in the territory. His career took him throughout the Southeast, to Florida, Memphis, Texas, and Puerto Rico. On October 2, 1984, he won a phantom match over Hector Guerrero in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to win the NWA World Junior Heavyweight title. Ironically, Guerrero had won the belt in another phantom match. Davis lost the title in the opening match of Starrcade 1984 to Denny Brown, although I don't believe any of these switches were ever officially recognized by the NWA. In the mid-80s he formed the Rock and Roll RPMs with Tommy Lane, who he'd broken into the business with. They became an awesome high-spot team, basically a heeled version of the Rock and Roll Express. Very early on, they actually used the ring names DJ and LP, although those were quickly dropped. As a team, they won the WWC versions of the World Tag Team title on June 29, 1986 in San Juan, Puerto Rico, beating Eric Embry and Crusher in the finals of a tournament. They won the belts a second time on September 21, 1986 in San Juan, beating Luke Williams and Butch Miller, then wrestling as the Pastors. From there they moved to Memphis, where they won the Southern Tag titles on 5 different occasions. They beat Jeff Jarrett and Billy Travis on November 17, 1986 and again on January 11, 1987. The Nasty Boys on September 19 and October 10, 1987, and the Midnight Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, on November 16, 1987. They also feuded with the Fantastics over the world-class version of the World Tag Team titles in Dallas. After dropping out of sight for a few years, he returned to the scene in the early 90s as Maniac Mike Davis, doing a crazy man gimmick for the short-lived Global Wrestling Federation. When Jim Crockett attempted to revive the NWA in Dallas, he came in wearing a mask as Aries. That run came to an end when Tony Norris, who ended up going to the WWF and injuring tons of guys as Ahmed Johnson, knocked him out with an errant clothesline to the jaw. After leaving wrestling, Davis found a job installing telephone systems in prisons around the country. In house notes. Very special thanks to the following people for their help in producing Figure 4 Weekly this week: Gladys Gibson, Dave Meltzer, Zach Arnold, Alex Merves, Colin Vasallo, Robert Bahari, Manuel Gonzalez, Dan Lovronsky, James Yanoda, Bob Barnett, Harry Simon, Hisaharu Tanabe, Mike Lano, Chris Squires, Ken Hamblin, Alfredo Esparza, Jose Fernandez, Milton Fernandez, Jimmy Reject, Sean Garrett. The number next to your name on the address label indicates which issue your Figure 4 Weekly subscription expires with. Thus, you have a 341 next to your name. This is the final issue of your current subscription. It is best to send your renewal 3 to 4 weeks in advance of your final issue due to recent problems with the U.S. Postal Service. North American renewal rates: $200 per 2-year subscription, 104 issues, $110 per 1-year subscription, 52 issues, $60 per 6-month subscription, 24 issues, $35 per 3-month subscription, 12 issues. Overseas renewal rates: $275 per 2-year subscription, 104 issues, $150 per 1-year subscription, 52 issues, $80 per 6-month subscription, 24 issues, and $42 per 3-month subscription, 12 issues. Please make all checks or money orders payable in U.S. funds to Figure 4 Weekly and send to P.O. Box 426, Woodinville, Washington 980720426. To order with your Visa or MasterCard, call our automated system toll-free at 1-800-960-3366. Please note there will be a $1 processing fee added to all credit card orders. Our 24-hour office number is 425-485-0384. Our email address is figure4@9netcom.com or brian@wrestlingobserver.com. You can place an order with your Visa or MasterCard through email as well. When sending news, questions, comments, or results, email is the preferred format, with postal mail being second. Don't forget the second, third, and fourth Super Chico tapes are available, featuring dozens of my recent indie matches from around the Northwest. The tapes are recorded in SP mode for superior playback and available for $20, which includes priority mail delivery to anywhere in the world. There is a special 2.5-hour edition of Volume 4 available for $26, which features a tour of Figure 4 Weekly headquarters as well. The following package deals are available. Regular editions of 2, 3, and 4 can be purchased together for $50 total, a savings of $10. If you'd like the special edition of Volume 4 in addition to 2 and 3, the cost will be $55 total, which is a savings of $11. At this time, no back issues of Figure 4 Weekly are available. Older articles are posted several times per week at www.wrestlingobserver.com. The site, hosted by Dave Meltzer, Alex Merves, and I, is updated several times per day with news tidbits, feature articles, polls, and interviews with the biggest names in wrestling. WWF. Not a whole lot happening as the guys had a rare week off. I guess this shouldn't come as much of a surprise, but it appears almost a certainty that Kevin Nash will be coming in. He had a meeting with the WWF 2 weeks ago to discuss a possible deal, since his Time Warner contract was set to expire December 31st at midnight. Things appeared to have fallen apart a few months back after Nash requested no more than 12 dates per month and the WWF refused to give him less than 15. As the year began to wind down, Nash began talking with World Wrestling All-Stars, which was willing to give him a big money contract which wouldn't require him to work more than a handful of dates every month, or very hard in the ring, for that matter. Whether he was seriously considering this or just wanted to get word out to leverage a better deal with the WWF is open to speculation. There is also the possibility that he wanted more money from was for their lighter schedule, which would be a reason for him to get word out that he's back negotiating with the WWF. He's telling people he's willing to do the 15 dates now, which either means he wants the WWF job badly or is trying to bargain his way into a better was deal. Most likely the former. Another sticking point to the original negotiations, that he wouldn't come in without Scott Hall, has also been cleared with Nash no longer making that demand. Of course, you know that we want Hall. Chance will probably start immediately, and who knows how the WWF will react to that. Friends say that although a deal hasn't been signed as of press time, his coming in is almost an inevitability. The belief is that he probably won't debut at the big Madison Square Garden Raw on January 7th, but maybe a week or two later. Remember, all plans can change in an instant. There is also a chance, and please don't wet yourselves, that Shawn Michaels could be back on TV soon as well. He had a meeting with Vince McMahon and Jim Ross prior to his appearances on Access, and they all agreed that maybe it was time to try doing something together again. If you think the politics in the WWF were crazy the last few years, wait until Michaels, Nash and Hunter all find themselves sharing a dressing room. They caused havoc in the early 90s, and that was back when they were younger and far more inexperienced when it comes to political maneuvering. Now, years later, all of them, well, maybe not Michaels, have evolved into truly world-class manipulators. Chances are, not only will they be subtly working Vince, the writers and their fellow wrestlers, but each other as well. In some ways it will be fun to watch, but in other ways, probably the majority, it will be a real disaster. If Hulk Hogan comes in, and it's pretty clear from media appearances that he really wants to, one can only imagine the kind of games that would be played. I had a field day on the WWF's Year in Review site. They had a section with superstar picks, which included Billy Kidman, Tommy Dreamer, Dallas Page, Chavo Guerrero, No Jr., so apparently he's his father now, and Sean Stasiak, all of whom are fired. Boy, is that promotional split going to be a disaster. They also questioned such luminaries as Brooklyn Brawler, Howard Finkel, and Teddy Long. Almost everyone chose Kurt Angle as Superstar of the Year. Edge picked himself for Breakout Performer of the Year, his TLC match at WrestleMania for Match of the Year, his feud with Christian for Rivalry of the Year, his own music for Theme of the Year, the night he turned on Christian in Toronto for Moment of the Year. I was shocked he didn't mention his winning King of the Ring while he was at it. Kidman chose Tori as Diva of the Year, well, duh, and the time when Trish had to bark like a dog as Moment of the Year. That's scary. Devon liked the barking as well. He also chose Kane as Superstar of the Year. No, seriously. Christian chose his own entrance music as Theme of the Year, which shows he has a sense of humor. Tommy Dreamer chose All the Divas as Diva of the Year. Paige chose DDP Has Woman Bend Over as Moment of the Year. That was also Vignette of the Decade. Matt chose Lita Kisses Matt Hardy as Moment of the Year. Oh tilde. Jeff chose Lita as Superstar of the Year and also as Best Diva. Uh-oh. Chuck Palumbo showed he had the best sense of humor of anyone by choosing WWF superstars Attack Palumbo and O'Hare at Madison Square Garden as Moment of the Year. If I recall correctly, the WWF superstars in question beat the shit out of them legit in that angle. Angle chose his own matches with Shane Benoit and Austin as Match of the Year. Well, he's probably right. Lillian chose me as Superstar of the Year. Okay, not really. Benoit may have been the smartest of anyone except Tommy Dreamer by voting too close to call for Diva of the Year. By the way, almost nobody chose Stacy, which was surprising. Howard Finkel, for Superstar of the Year, had this quote which I am not making up. Chris Jericho finally was able to grab the brass ring from that proverbial merry-go-round that he was on. We also got comments from the staff. Even my good friend Seth Mates got to make his picks, which he did by writing a term paper-like essay for each one. Matt Duda, for entrance Theme of the Year, actually wrote Shane McMahon. Ka-ching. Here comes the dollar. Almost all the staff members chose Steph as Diva of the Year. What a surprise. Chris Jericho will be playing charity hockey games in New York and Los Angeles this month. January 19th he'll be doing Super Skate 2002, which benefit the Christopher Reeves Paralysis Foundation and the New York Rangers Cheering for Children Foundation. January 30th he'll be doing the NHL All-Star Celebrity Challenge at the Staples Center, which will be benefiting several charities. DirecTV's edition of WB and UPN went into effect last week, so subscribers can now watch SmackDown. Triple H's first matches back will be January 4th in Binghamton, New York, the 5th in Springfield, Massachusetts, and the 6th in Trenton, New Jersey. Of course, he returns to Raw the following evening. He's scheduled for tag matches, teaming with Kane as a babyface to work Chris Jericho and Kurt Angle. My guess would be that he stands on the apron most of the time, gets the hot tag, then pins Jericho clean with the pedigree for the win. Val Venis also returns starting on the 4th for IC title matches against Edge. For those of you who don't read the TV reports, he's been working for OVW in Louisville the last few months. Raw did a 3.2 for Christmas Eve, which is incredibly low. First hour only did a 2.9, but no surprise given the air date. The share was up, however, which means of the people watching TV that night, a bigger percentage were watching wrestling than the week before. As usual, XS did in 0.8 and Heat did a 1.1. Dallas Page and Kimberly went to Las Vegas over the holidays to celebrate their 10th anniversary. They were remarried by Elvis. Here's the latest on the Hardys. They have been taken off TV for the foreseeable future because of the feeling that their act had grown stale. I believe they'll still be working house shows. It's so strange, because they built up the breakup angle for so long, and then when it didn't appear to take off after about 2 weeks, they killed it dead and took all 3 of them off TV. Reminds me of another company that is, as we speak, out of business. I wish Vince and the rest of the crew would look back at the history of their own company and realize that superstars aren't made in 2 weeks. Remember the blue chipper Rocky Maivia? He didn't become The Rock in 2 weeks. Remember the Greenwich snob Hunter Hearst Helmsley? It took that guy like 5 years. Or how about the ringmaster Steve Austin? In hindsight, Kurt Angle is so lucky that the fans took to him on day one, or God knows where he'd be today. Perhaps in Ohio Valley feuding with Mr. Black. Like another guy that everyone thought was going to be the bomb but wasn't given a chance, Sean O'Hare. Lately it seems Vince panics after minutes of something not working. Remember in June when it was supposed to be Chris Jericho versus Steve Austin for the WWF title at King of the Ring, but Vince got cold feet and put Benoit in the mix? The Hardys had one bad match with each other and all of a sudden they're done for. They are in a bad situation because they're a team that nobody really cares about anymore, but doesn't really want to see wrestle each other either. Jeff had a chance to break away from the pack earlier this year after beating Triple H, but then he got murdered the following week and it was all over for him. Matt might have had a chance after his ill turn a few weeks back, but I seem to recall him immediately being destroyed and pinned clean by Bradshaw, an undercard guy who never gets seriously pushed. And the worst thing they could do is take Lita away from them. Because as pathetic as this sounds, she's the only one the fans care about. You don't know how sad I get when I see Jeff Hardy out there taking a complete beating and the fans are chanting for Lita. Speaking of Jeff, there had been a lot of problems with him recently as well, mostly stemming from him constantly showing up late. He's made it very clear to a lot of people that he doesn't want to be in wrestling his whole life, unlike Matt, who wants to go in some fashion until he absolutely can't go no more. Jeff, whose body has to be falling apart even though he doesn't let anyone know about it, is clearly starting to burn out, which explains much of his recent behavior. It would probably be best to let these 3 go home for a few months rather than just taking them off TV. Doing house shows means going on the road, and when you're as burnt out as Jeff is, that's not good. At the Raw taping for the Christmas Eve show, there were a bunch of fans who heard Big Show doing his Hulk Hogan impersonation and weren't paying attention. They actually thought Hogan had returned and were described as getting way too excited. Headbanger Chaz's contract expires January 14th. He does not seem to think he's going to be renewed and is already looking for indie bookings. Bad news for those of you in the UK, as Sky Sports will not be airing the 4 PPVs previously broadcast by Channel 4. In other words, no Royal Rumble. The story about the Scorpion King reshoots is beginning to hit the mainstream media. Online last week reported that $6 million was set to be spent on art direction, and that the changes were being made to save the movie. As we talked about several weeks ago, the reviews for the test screening were terrible. Think about that. Mummy Returns was horrible and it got great exit poll reviews. Imagine how abysmal Scorpion King would have to be to get bad reviews. Raw for January 7th from Madison Square Garden is already sold out. In an update from last week, in regards to the Asian tour, the WWF actually has a 1-hour show on satellite, so their TV exposure is as strong as any other major company in that country. However, their ratings are only about half of what Noah does and a third of what New Japan does. Very strange article in the New York Times regarding the decline in viewership for WWF programs. The article claimed that WWF has recently lost 12% of total viewers and as much as 30% of the teen audience. First off, I think losing 30% of the teen audience would cause a bigger drop than 12% of the total, but I'm horrible at math, so who knows. Anyway, they had a quote from Julie Hoffman, WWF Chief of Marketing, who said the WWF commissioned its own research and found that following September 11th, a significant portion of its core audience just took off. They were gone, scattered to the winds. Mom and Dad took control of the TV set. The traditional parental role took over. I seriously wish I knew what the hell Julie Hoffman was trying to say in this statement. Is she trying to say that parents, concerned about the September 11th attacks, took over the TV sets to watch news coverage, thus preventing their kids from watching WWF programming? I hope that's not what she's saying, because not only is that the most absurd excuse I've ever heard for falling ratings, but it's also in extremely poor taste. I'm already reading about people getting excited about the fact that Rob Van Dam is on the poster for No Way Out. It may be a brand new year, but some things will never change. WWF Developmental. Alan Funk, formerly Kiwi, did an interview for Chairshot's Radio last week. He said in a way he was glad that he left HWA when he did, because it allowed him to be somewhere else when Russ Haas died. He said Russ was a good guy and that they'd recently exchanged phone numbers to keep in touch, and he didn't think he'd have been able to handle the death on top of all the other stressful things that were happening. He said he was disappointed with his short WWF career. He said that he was just starting to get a push in WCW when WWF bought the company. He was excited to get a new start, but then they called him and told him that he had 2 weeks to move to Cincinnati. He said he had to immediately sell his house and didn't have a whole lot of time to discuss everything with his wife, so she was pissed. He said Vince Russo and Terry Taylor created the Kiwi character and told him it was supposed to be an eccentric guy. They were worried that fans would see it as a character designed to make fun of gay people, which was why they had him come to the ring with 3 different women. He said he was willing to do whatever they asked him because he just wanted the opportunity to work TV. He said the WCW locker room at the end was great and everyone was really cool to him, particularly Kevin Nash. Nash got really smart there at the end. He learned that no matter what happens to a person in this business, there is always the chance, unless they die, that you will run into them again. It was always so funny to watch him take certain guys under his wing, because it was obvious that they were the young guys with the most potential who would be on top someday, and by befriending them, he was guaranteeing himself a spot for life. It's a great strategy. Anyway, Kiwi said that Tom Pritchard, Johnny Ace and Leigh Thatcher all had nothing but nice things to say to him, other than "you're released," which he considered a good sign. He said Pritchard was working to try to get him his job back. He said it made him feel good to know that nobody thought he should have been cut. He said he'd talked to Jimmy Hart with the XWF, but Hart told him that they weren't hiring until February. He said he was a huge Hulk Hogan fan, which was why he started doing the Funkster gimmick at the end in HWA. He said when he worked indies in the future it would probably be as Kiwi because that's how most people remembered him. XWF. The house shows have begun. I always thought the term house show sort of meant a non-televised show from a promotion that has TV, but apparently it now just means any show from any promotion that does not air on television. The first night was Hammond, Indiana, and the reviews were not good. There was some sort of ticket problem where fans who ordered through the XWF 800 line didn't end up having tickets when they arrived. The show was held up until everyone got into the building. I believe the ticket problem, but it's so typical for a promotion to find any excuse to start late. My friend Buddy Wayne, who always tries to go on first so he can get the hell out of Dodge, waits right by the curtain. If the show doesn't start exactly on time, he tells the music guy to just start playing his song anyway. Dave Penzer was ring announcer for the evening. They had some guys from Mankow's Morning Madhouse come out and do a little show to get the crowd going. Basically, they hyped up the Milwaukee house show confrontation between Mancow and Jimmy Hart, which was scheduled for the following day. Yes, they did this on a non-televised event, perhaps hoping the fans in Illinois were going to drive to Wisconsin to catch this great action. Roddy Piper came out and talked for a long time about Vince's ass. Then he started talking about Matilda and Don Morocco. Now I wish this was televised. Jimmy Hart and Hale came out. Hart wanted Piper to sign a match between Hale and a man called Louis the Rock. I have no idea who Louis the Rock is. There is a wrestler up here called Louis Rage, but I will bet you $100 million it's not the same guy. Piper said no. Hale would face Greg Valentine. They had a horrible match that Valentine won after Hart accidentally hit Hale with his megaphone. I thought the XWF was all about elevating the young talent. Kid Cash beat Josh Matthews, tough enough, in what was called a pretty bad match, but still the best one of the night. They missed a ton of spots and Josh looked green. At one point he almost broke every rib in Cash's body with a botched senton. Penzer came back out to inform the fans of something, but the fans were too busy chanting what? To listen. Penzer got pissed and demanded they get it out of their system. I'll bet that worked. British Storm, who is this enormous man bigger and more ripped than Scott Steiner, with about a tenth of the ability, beat Norman Smiley with a head scissors. I hope Frank A. Gotch is reading this. Dresden beat Big Vito. There were problems in this match. Vito was supposed to put the guy over, but changed the finish in mid-ring and told the ref to DQ him after a low blow. Dresden didn't sell the first low blow, so Vito had to kick him again. Then he stormed out of the ring and threw a tantrum backstage. Thank God there are no prima donnas in the XWF. I wonder if Vito has made up his mind about whether to go to WWF or stay with XWF? Didn't he say he'd do it by the first of the year? Time is running out. Penzer introduced the X-Girls. Nobody came out. So Penzer stood around looking like an idiot for a few minutes before the girls finally appeared. At that point they did a 45-minute intermission where you could get your pictures taken with the girls for $10. A shockingly large amount of fans took advantage of this offer. Penzer, meanwhile, plugged XWF t-shirts and hats, which he called collector's items. That's for sure. Jim Duggan beat Wall. Another great example of putting over the new generation. Wall has a completely new body. Duggan has an even older body than he did in WCW, but he covers it up with flag-patterned overalls. Unfortunately, Willie Nelson was nowhere to be seen. Road Warriors beat Nasty Boys. Hawk called Knobs a gerbil-faced twit. Match went about 10:35, of which about 10:34 consisted of both teams drawing over the mic. Vamp beat Buff Bagwell and Kurt Hennig in a Triple Jeopardy match. No, they did not answer questions. Bagwell called Hammond a shithole, which makes Hawk's statement earlier all of a sudden not sound so bad. He also said he was only there to pay for his $1 million house. Actually, that statement is totally legit, as his mortgage is something incredible and he doesn't exactly have a steady income these days. Someone actually told me it was $11,000 per month, but that sounds impossible to believe. Either way, it's really high. Piper came out and helped Vamp win. Crowd was around 2,000. Reports we got said the fans were hot at the beginning but quickly died as the show wore on. They drew between 2,000 and 3,000 in Milwaukee on December 29th at the US Cellular Arena, which seats around 12,000 for wrestling. Way too big a building for this group at this point in time. As big as it was, however, the sound system was horrible and most of the fans couldn't hear a thing that was being said. Rena Mero and Piper came out and hyped up the show. Jimmy Hart and Hale interrupted the promo. Jimmy said Hale was his new monster, then asked Rena to please ixnay his match with Greg Valentine. Yeah, that Hale sure sounds like a monster. Piper said no way, and the match was on. At least Hale won this time. Big Vito was back, and this time he actually put over Dresden. Kid Cash, who was billed as Kid Crash, beat Joshua, said to be much better than the previous night's match without all the missed spots. Vampiro and Johnny B. Bad beat Buff Bagwell and Kurt Hennig. Bad cut a promo before the match making fun of Bagwell for getting fired. Bagwell said he didn't get fired, he got released. There's a difference, he explained. At least, I think there is. This was straight out of WCW. Vamp grabbed the mic after the match and began profusely thanking the fans for showing up. They did intermission again with the X-Girls. Didn't hear how long it took this time. Hacksaw beat the Wall. That's 2 times in a row. British Storm beat Smiley again with the head scissors. Main event saw Nasty Boys beat the Road Warriors with help from Piper. But then Rena came out and reversed the decision. Man are doing angles already and they don't even have TV. Both teams spent another 10 minutes before the match even started jaw-jacking. I hope none of the fans from Hammond drove across state lines to see the Mancow Madhouse match with Jimmy Hart, because reports indicate it did not take place. Final show was in Green Bay and drew a little over 1,500. Piper opened the show cutting his promo, saying the XWF was going to be an alternative to the WWF sports entertainment. Then he began talking profusely about his days in the WWF. Jimmy Hart came out and talked about the WWF as well. Piper signed Hale vs. Valentine, which Valentine won after Hart accidentally hit Hale with the megaphone. You'd think Hart would have learned by now not to try hitting Valentine with his megaphone, because it always backfires. Valentine was compared to the Iron Sheik, which is about the least complimentary thing that can be said about you as a wrestler these days. Dresden beat Big Vito with a power slam. Vito was very professional this evening. Kid Crash beat Joshua. Josh was said to look okay. British Storm beat Norman Smiley with the head scissors. Storm was said to be the worst worker on the show. Ex-girls took their pictures, but they limited them to 50 so intermission wouldn't last until the next morning. Duggan, who worked in Montreal earlier that day, beat Wall. Main event saw Bagwell beat Hennig and Vampiro after hitting both of them with brass knucks. Former WCW referee Mickey J was the ref and got bumped right before the finish. Vamp cut a promo after the match thanking everyone, including the ring truck guys, for putting on such a great show. But alas, the show was not over yet. No, the fans had to watch Road Warriors beat Nasty Boys with help from Piper. I hope none of the Milwaukee fans drove out to this show because they would have been really confused about why Piper was helping the good guys this time. And also why all the other matches were almost exactly the same as the previous night. Said to be an okay show. With all that said, they already canceled the 3 shows scheduled for Port Huron, Battle Creek, and Toledo. In a press release, the company claimed that negotiations to get a TV deal were going very well, but the TV company, it was not specified exactly who this was, asked them to keep all the TV footage exclusive for them. Therefore, the release explained, they were unable to use their infomercials as a vehicle for ticket sales. They said they taped the Milwaukee show and would be rush producing, which is always a good idea, a new infomercial, and would soon announce revised house show dates. Those close to the company claim they won't be running a single show until after the NAPT convention, which I believe takes place in mid-February. Apparently the talent was paid for the cancelled shows, which some took as a sign that the shows were not cancelled due to financial problems. However, anyone with scant knowledge of the wrestling business knows that in the vast majority of cases, the talent is hardly the biggest expense in running a show. The company reportedly has an 8 pay-per-view deal with DirecTV and other cable providers for 2002. I was kind of hoping that they would wait to see how the first show did before diving into this. Promoter Andrew McManus is telling everyone that he's really not taking a huge financial risk doing the shows because it's only going to cost him in the neighborhood of $250,000 to get each of them on the air. The break-even is set at 41,000 buys, which is an 0.1 buy rate. He figures that even if he gets just 20,000 buys, he's only losing a paltry $125,000 per show. According to sources close to the housing market, in some parts of the country you can buy a new home for $125,000. I guess if you've got that kind of money to throw away and that's what you want to do, more power to you. Apparently, the overseas shows do very well because they get a much larger split of the pay-per-view profits than they do in the US. The in-demand website has a preview for the first live pay-per-view, which airs February 24th, claiming it will feature the reunion of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Oops. They opened up an office in Los Angeles last week, which is where all the checks are being mailed from. The company will be based there. The show, taped at the Sydney Superdome a few months back, airs this Sunday on pay-per-view. I hope they show the angle with Disco and the men in the banana suits. U.S. Indies. Superstar Billy Graham was hospitalized in intensive care over the weekend after suffering 4 burst veins in his ongoing battle with advanced liver disease. He lost so much blood due to a lack of circulation that he was in danger of losing his limbs, but they gave him several blood transfusions and he made a remarkable recovery. Graham, who is in the middle of writing his autobiography, will be needing a liver transplant. Spanky and Michael Shane vs. Oz and Iki Ikaloa has been added to Ron Feinstein's February 23rd Ring of Honor show. All 4 guys were trained by Shawn Michaels. Greg from Tough Enough is now working as Greg Matthews. You know, like Josh Matthews. I guess they're now officially brothers. RandomWrestling.com had an interesting interview with Ted DiBiase up last week. He talked about an altercation he had with Shawn Michaels in 1990, which he described as minor. This is kind of a long story. Shawn and Marty Jannetty, and working as the Rockers, were given the WWF Tag Team titles over Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart on October 30, 1990 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I believe the decision was made because Neidhart was leaving the company before the match aired. However, Neidhart was convinced to stay, so Vince decided to pretend the title change never happened. The official explanation was that the decision was reversed because one of the ropes broke during the match. Anyway, Shawn apparently went crazy upon hearing this news and started burying Hart and Neidhart backstage. DiBiase took exception to this, which led to the altercation. "I like the days where 2 guys would just shut their mouths and wrestle," he said. He also noted that he had dinner with Michaels in 1999 and they ironed everything out. When asked about Vince, DiBiase said he liked Vince as a promoter, but questioned his moral values as a person. Sounds familiar. He said the $1 million belt was still at Titan Towers and valued at $140,000. I find that number a bit hard to believe. Most wrestling belts cost around $1,500, and to think Vince actually created a belt with legit gold and jewels on it when the fake stuff would have worked just fine for TV seems questionable. Of course he wanted DiBiase to live the gimmick, often giving him thousands in cash to go blow at bars on the road, so who knows. DiBiase put over Kurt Angle as someone he wished he'd gotten a chance to wrestle. He talked about his feud with Virgil, which he said, in hindsight, he was embarrassed to be a part of because of the racist undertones. He said the reason he did that feud was because Vince gave him two choices. The first was to do the feud with Virgil. The second was to feud with Jim Powers and then lose the belt to him at WrestleMania. So Ted wisely chose the former. The funniest thing in the interview was how upfront he was about Scott Steiner's physique. Just look at him, he looks imposing, but he's on D-bol, Dianabol for 9 months of the year. He denies using steroids, but he does use them. On the Iowa Classics Beauties, Beasts and Brawls pay-per-view, they showed a Bruiser Brody vs. Crusher Blackwell match, which could be classified as two of the above three. Afterwards they aired a graphic which explained that Brody's career ended when he was stabbed by another wrestler in Mexico. Good to see they did their research. There was an interesting article about the Poffo family in the December 27th edition of the St. Petersburg Times. The story was centered around Angelo and how much respect his wife and children had for him. They had quotes from Randy Savage, who at the time was still claiming to be trying to set up a match between himself and Hulk Hogan for the Children's Hospital, even though the deadline for Hogan to accept the challenge had been 3 days prior. Most likely they did the interview a week or so before it was published. Aside from trying to set up shoot fights for children, Randy recently went to work creating a tribute for his father. In 1945, Angelo set the world record for sit-ups, performing 6,033 in 4 hours and 10 minutes at his naval gym. Angelo said he'd only planned on doing 6,000, but he'd read that someone else had died trying to break the record. He was so happy to have not died that he did an extra 33, one for each year of the Lord's life. For his efforts, he was awarded a championship belt from the people at Ripley's Believe It or Not. Savage, wanting to honor his father in some way, ended up completely renovating the weight room at the St. Petersburg Admiral Farragut Naval Academy and renaming it the Angelo Poffo Powerhouse Gym. He even had a painter recreate the Ripley's cover touting Angelo's record on the gym wall. Lanny is currently working on a book of anti-smoking limericks. Apparently, his antidrug is poetry. Michael Modest and Donovan Morgan have officially opened up their training school at Medina's Gym at 20613 Mission Boulevard in Hayward, California. There was an open house this past Sunday. They will be using one of the old WCW rings. First camp starts January 15th and training starts with $500 down. For more info, you can write Manb Academy, seriously, and they need a new name right now. P.O. Box 173, North Texas ST Suite J, Fairfield, California 94533. The real reason Brian Christopher didn't work the UPW show last week had nothing to do with an injury suffered on the WAS tour. Instead, he was scheduled to come in for 2 dates and promoter Rick Baseman had to cancel one of them. Christopher then raised his price for the remaining date and Baseman said he couldn't afford it. Joni Laurer will be hosting the Wednesday night movies on American Movie Classics the entire month of February. Amazingly, this is the only Joni story this entire week. At this shocking rate of decline, she'll be a Where Are They Now? Trivia question by next week. Disco Fury beat American Dragon on December 26 in Surrey to win the ECCW Canadian Junior Heavyweight title. Dragon is moving to Northern California to become head instructor for the All-Pro Wrestling School. Dusty Rhodes has a Goldust working for his Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling, and it's not Dustin Rhodes. Jacques Rougeau, who is the single greatest indie wrestling promoter in North America, drew 5,500 fans to the Molson Center Sunday for a show headlined by Kurgan vs. Pierre Ouellette with Sid Vicious as the special guest referee. That's no joke. Jim Duggan worked the opener, then hopped on a plane and immediately flew out for the XWF show that evening. They did a kids match with Mad Max, who was like 13 years old and 203 pounds, that's a huge kid, beating Jean-Jacques Rougeau, 11 years, 97 pounds. Apparently, Jacques does not have weight classes in his promotion, and it says a lot for him that he had his own 11-year-old kid lose in his hometown. Either that or Max has already learned how to refuse to do a job. Tiger Baby beat Little Broken in Minnie's hair versus retirement match. Broken got his head shaved afterwards. At least Jacques adheres to his stipulations unlike every other promoter in this country. Maybe that's why he can draw 5,500 fans for show headline by Carl Ouellet and Kurgan. And Sid, who, by the way, turned on Pierre for the main event finish. Millennium Wrestling Federation ran their Bushwhacker benefit show on December 28 in Revere, Massachusetts. Main event was Road Dogg and Nova beating Chris Chetty and Little Guido, apparently by DQ when referee Chris Harvard of Tough Enough fame turned on Dogg. Didn't get a number on how much money was raised, but we'll try to have it by next week. Buff Bagwell got married over the summer? His wife's name is Judy. Judy Bagwell. Seriously. Japan. I screwed up the article on the Tokyo Sports voting 2 weeks ago. To make a long story short, there are no second and third place votes. Basically, they get 22 guys together and vote on all the categories. If nobody ends up with 12 votes, then they eliminate the lower ranked stuff and vote again. They keep this up until someone finally gets 12 votes and wins. Vampiro canceled off the latest All Japan tour due to an illness in the family. He flew back to Canada following this weekend's XWS shows. EMLL. Main event of the EMLL TV taping at Arena Coliseo on Christmas saw Los Brazos, Super Porky and Brazo de Platino and Brazo de Oro go to a double DQ with Los Villanos in a feud people were writing about 10 years ago and will probably be writing about again in 2010. Porky unmasked Villano 4 in the third fall. Villano responded by kicking him in the nuts. So the ref DQ'd both teams. Bet the fans love that. This was Platino's first ever Arena Coliseo match. Semi-main was Satanico and Averno and Mephisto beating Ricky Marvin and Blue Demon Jr. and Mr. Niebla. Tarzan Boy retained the NWA light heavyweight title over Atlantis on the December 20th house show. Semi-main was La Parca and Mr. Niebla and Brazo de Plata beating Emilio Charles Jr. and Ray Bucanero and Black Tiger in what was probably a really good match. With the exception of Porky, all those guys can go, and even Porky can be really entertaining if used sparingly. Porky gave away a few hundred photos of himself dressed up as Santa Claus after the match. In the old days, Porky would actually dress up as Santa at Arena Coliseo and let the children come into the ring and sit on his lap. It doesn't look like there will be any Arena Mexico shows in the month of January. Speaking of Arena Mexico, the show last Friday night, Olympico fractured his leg. As a result, the trio's title match with Oyampico and Mr. Niebla and Safari versus the Infernales will have to be pushed back. The match was scheduled for this week's show. Zumbito should be back this week. This will be quite the comeback to see. He's not only coming off an injury that kept him out of action for 3 months, but he also could have lost his powers after having his mullet cut off following a hair match. Remember the deal where you could send in ideas for a new name for Hijo de Rayo Jr.? This was printed in Ovaciones last week. Seguimos recibiendo sus correos electrónicos sobre las ideas para un nuevo apelativo para el hombre sin nombre. El más reciente es el de Brian Alvarez, quien sugiere que el hijo del Rayo opte por el nombre de el talento de la familia de Jalisco o bien el hijo sin nombre del hombre sin talento. En fin, ese es su punto de vista. The translation is as follows: we continue to receive emails with ideas for a new name for hombre sin nombre, man without a name. The most recent comes from Brian Alvarez, who suggests Hijo de Rayo de Jalisco Jr. decides on the name of El Talento de la Familia de Jalisco, the talent of the Jalisco family, or El Hijo sin nombre del hombre sin talento, the son with no name of the man with no talent. In short, that is his point of view. AAA. Antonio Pena told Ovaciones that he wants to pretty much do a world tour in 2002, hitting such countries as Spain, El Salvador, Japan, Colombia, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Brazil, Paraguay, and Puerto Rico. Write that one down. They ran a split crew on January 1st. The first show in Gimnasio was headlined by Lady Apache and Estrellita versus La Cola and Mujer de Mente, worst gimmick in the world. The other show in Arena San Juan Pantitlan had La Parca Jr. and Mascara Sagrada and Connect, the baddest man in Mexico for a while, versus Dark Knees and Electroshock and El Mohicano I. I'm trying to figure out which one was the A show and which one was the B show. Mexican Indies. There was a great article in the Los Angeles Times focusing on the career of Manuel de los Santos, who promotes small-time wrestling shows in Southern California and also works as the wrestler Kiss, pronounced Kiss in Spanish, the article explained. One interesting thing about the article is how, after visiting one of Santos' shows, the author Richard Morosi seems to almost mockingly state that he made a $500 profit for the evening. While nobody is going to become a millionaire off that kind of money, I think if you polled every single indie promoter in this country, the majority of them would be thrilled to come out with a $500 profit. I'll also ignore the fact that Morosi claimed Andre the Giant was 7'5". Kiss, who lost his match to Pia Roth Jr. in 1988, is married to former women's wrestler La Tahana and has 3 sons, aged 18, 12 and 8. The oldest, Eric, is already training to be a wrestler with his mother. Santos is already prohibiting photos of him unless he's wearing his wrestling mask. In the old territorial days, there were many preliminary wrestlers that became so famous locally that they could go into any restaurant and eat for free. I'm not sure if it's the same in Tijuana today, but Santos did mention that he always gets double servings at all the restaurants. That does explain Brazo de Plata's physique. You might wonder why, of all the stories in the article, I decided to mention this one. It's because, for whatever reason, getting something for free is one of the biggest thrills in my life, and I would liken the ability to get food for free to discovering the fountain of youth or a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. Anyway, the article talks about how Kiss, or Rudo, always stops to give autographs to the fans after a show. Others, such as a blonde, big-haired Rudo from Mexico City, just rush to their cars and haul ass out of there. I wonder if they were talking about Emilio Charles Jr. The article finishes with this quote from Santos regarding his legacy: "I want to teach my son and send him to Mexico. He's going to be a big star." Bombero Infernal and Black Dragon appear to be heading towards what the IWRG webpage claims will be their 6th mask versus hair match. That would seem to indicate that Infernal lost 5 straight times. Heard the Io del Santo versus La Parca match from Monterrey was very good. Crowd was going crazy for everything they did and Santo bled a gusher. They did a disputed finish with the referees getting into a brawl and one of them getting bumped, leading to the other counting the pinfall for Santo. First referee then woke up and reversed the decision. Finish was said to have taken it down a notch. Mixed martial arts. While the ban on MMA in Sao Paulo, Brazil is still in effect stemming from a law sanctioned December 6, there has been such an uproar over the last several weeks that the councilman responsible for writing the bill, Acelino Tattoo, has agreed to meet with representatives of the sport to discuss rules changes which would allow it to continue. Tattoo did himself no favors by admitting publicly that he had never actually watched an MMA show before writing the bill. Then, on December 20, a former secretary filed corruption charges against him, so he's now under investigation, and his bank accounts have been suspended. This is actually fairly old news, but Eric Bischoff's Battle Management/Entertainment has signed a deal with Creative Artists Agency to co-represent the K1 fighting organization. Basically, Bischoff and his crew, which includes Peter Levin and Jeremy Lappin, will be working to get television, pay-per-view, home video, sponsorship and merchandising agreements for K1 in the United States. International Indies. Hayabusa has been moved into the general ward of the hospital from intensive care after having surgery on December 29 to remove bacillus germs which had gotten into his heart valves. His next scheduled checkup is January 12. Complete lineup for the 0-1 show on January 6 in Tokyo at Korakuen Hall has Ryuji Choi vs Yoshiaki Fujiwara, Kohei Sato vs Steve Corino, Tatsuhito Takaiwa vs Sean McCulley, Josh Dempsey vs Predator, Sylvester Turkey, Shinjiro Otani and Masato Tanaka vs Tom Howard and Samoa Joe for the NWA Intercontinental Tag Team titles, and Shinya Hashimoto vs Nathan Jones for the NWA Heavyweight title. Samurai TV ran their 5th anniversary wrestling show at Korakuen Hall on December 28. Results saw Katsuyori Shibata and Wataru Inoue beat Minoru Tanaka and Dolgersher and Sarjude beat New Japan in 12:53 when Shibata made Sarjude submit. Poison Sawada and Takashi Sasaki beat Kyohei Mikami and Tanomusaku Toba in 11:09. Kazuya Yuasa beat High 69 in 11:52. Mariko Yoshida and Noki A beat Michiro Omakai and Baby A in 15:30 when A pinned A. Jun Kasai beat Abdullah Kobayashi in 15:14. Remember earlier this year when Kasai got his skin literally ripped off his body in one of the most disgusting hardcore matches of all time? Now he's doing small shows for television network anniversary parties. I hope it was worth it. And Shinjiro Otani and Daisuke Sekimoto draw Masato Tanaka and Kohei Sato. Tape reviews. WR96 Japan, July, August 2001. This is one of Bob Barnett's tapes. It can be ordered by visiting www.bobbarnett.com or by sending $20, check or money order, to Bob Barnett, 3101 5th Street No. 2, Santa Monica, California, 90405. Yuji Nagata NC Kazunari Murakami. Total Pride style match. Say what you will about Inoki, but the crowd was going crazy for the submission attempts and the short knees to the head. No sooner should I write these words than Nagata put on his Nagata lock, a hold I guarantee you will never see in Pride. Especially after New Year's Eve. Murakami got the ropes. Then he refused to let go of them. Nagata kept kicking him and the ref kept telling him to stop. Finally, the ref pulled Nagata off, and Murakami took the opportunity to flatten him with a cheap shot and put on a cross arm breaker. Nagata got the ropes and Murakami refused to break. They ended up outside the ring and got into a crazy brawl. It got out of control to the point where the referee called for the bell. Crowd wasn't quite as negative as they'd normally be for a finish like this because it looked so out of control. Come to think of it, I reviewed this before. Oh well, it was worth watching again. Liger beat Kojima. I think I reviewed the massively clipped version of this before. Kojima got a near fall with his Kojima cutter. Liger kicked out of everything. Kojima went for his 2 lariats but Liger hit a palm blow and a brainbuster for an awesome near fall. Liger went for a second brainbuster, but Kojima turned it into a cutter. Kojima hit his killer lariat but took too long to make the cover. Liger kicked out. He took off his elbow pad and went for a second one, but Liger hit the palm blow out of nowhere for the pinfall. Huge pop for the finish. God, both these guys are so freaking great. Take note of the simplicity of some of these finishing moves. The lariat. The Shining Wizard. The palm blow. Yet they are all over because the fans have been conditioned to believe they are deadly. I believe it is possible to get any move in the world over. I already reviewed most of the remaining G1 matches on this tape. I would like to note that it includes the Keiji Muto vs Tadao Yasuda match, which included a fat-ass spot where Muto hit a Shining Wizard by jumping off the back of the referee. It also included the entire Muto vs Nagata final, which was the bomb tilde. Donovan Morgan and Michael Modest beat Kentaro Shiga and Akitoshi Saito. Lots of mat wrestling early. Morgan totally looks like an elongated Crash Holly. Bet you never thought you'd read the words elongated Crash Holly. Morgan hit both guys with an assisted flip dive to the outside. Saito is a scary man. His role was to tag in briefly and hit frightening power moves. Modest finally pinned Shiga with the Kryptonite Crunch. This was okay, but everybody didn't really click. Jun Akiyama beat Mitsuharu Misawa to win the GHC title. I reviewed this previously but it was worth watching again. Really good match, though not a classic. Yoshinobu Kanemaru beat Donovan Morgan. Morgan, while trapped in a chinlock, tried to get the crowd clapping along with him. That was really weird to see in Japan. It worked though. They started clapping and he immediately killed Kanemaru with a headfirst backdrop driver. Kanemaru went for a top rope Frankensteiner, Morgan turned it into a short powerbomb for a near fall. Morgan turned him inside out with a lariat and then hit Christopher Daniels' angel wings for a hot near fall. Kanemaru came back with a low blow and reverse DDT. Morgan kicked out of everything until Kanemaru hit him with 2 brutal brainbusters. Needless to say, Morgan did not kick out of those. If I recall correctly, this was Morgan's first loss in Noah. Television reviews. HWA TV tilde. November, Week 1. Patrick the Commissioner, who as an actor makes Hulk Hogan look like Ian McKellen, hosted the contract signing between Jamie Noble and Matt Striker. This signing appeared to take place in Patrick's mother's basement. There may have been an ironing board in the background. Striker said he wanted his own referee for the match. Patrick said okay. So Striker said it would be Pepper Parks. What the hell is wrong with him? Noble and Striker got into a fight. This was horrible to a hilarious degree. Easy Money beat Charlie Haas in an HWA title tournament match. Jim Cornette and Leigh Thatcher did commentary. Charlie is still pretty green. He hit a really scary power slam near the finish. Money won via count out when Haas chased Lance Cade back to the locker room. There are certain times when Money looks a bit mechanical, but overall he's very good and probably should be brought up sooner than later. Elix Skipper and Kiwi and Kid Romeo beat Matt Striker and Shark Boy and Pepper Parks. Striker looked really good. The more of this stuff I watch, the more depressed I get that some of these guys got cut. Skipper in particular looked very good in spots. It broke down into a 6-way. The fish at the depths of the sea or whatever the hell it's called on Elix, but he wasn't the legal man. Kiwi then hit Shark with whatever his finisher is called for the pinfall. Remember when wrestling moves only had one name? D'Lo Brown beat Haku in another tournament match. Haku applied a dreaded trapezius squeeze, which Cornette said could make his arms or his legs valueless to him in a wrestling match. He also did what might have been a mating call right there in mid-ring. D'Lo won with a missed spot into a sunset flip. This was okay. They showed clips of Cade turning on Charlie Haas from a house show. Lance Cade and C. Cody Hawk via DQ. Mike Sanders introduced Cade in mid-ring. Sanders tried to interfere for the finish but Charlie Haas made the save. Haas then hit the ring and attacked Cade for the DQ. Pretty much the entire locker room emptied at this point for a huge pull-apart. Steve Bradley beat Reno. Bradley sold a knee injury, so Reno went to work on it. Cornette was awesome, claiming he could see the knee starting to swell up from the booth. Ref took a bump and Reno grabbed a pair of knucks. Ray Steele ran out, hit Reno with a leg lariat, sold the knucks and KO'd him with them. Bradley then crawled over and covered Reno for the pin. Kimo and Steve Blackman and Ray Steele beat Evan Karagias and Shannon Moore and Brian Adams via DQ. Don't know where ECMO was. HWA main events are always a peanuts gallery of various characters. With that said, this was a lot better than you'd think. I was dreading Blackman versus Evan, but it wasn't too bad. Shannon takes a hell of a beating. Adams got the heat on Steele with his patented worst pile driver in wrestling. Kimo got the hot tag and ran wild. Cornette was really putting Shannon over as a hard worker, which was foreshadowing his babyface turn. It broke down into a six-way. Kimo hit Shannon with a face-first chokeslam. Evan made the save with a chair shot for the DQ. Lay and Patrick Tilda plugged upcoming house shows. How did Patrick get this job, by the way? AAA December 25, 2001. I almost had a heart attack because, for the first time I can ever remember, AAA aired before EMLL. I was petrified that I was going to have to watch 3 straight hours of this shit. Thankfully, the show was only about 50 minutes long, and the remaining time was devoted to EMLL. Lady Apache DDQ'd Tiffany in a national women's title versus Reina de Reinas title match. Estrella was out there as Apache's second wearing her grotesque ring attire, and Tiffany was wearing her usual dominatrix outfit, so I was terrified about what kind of unification I might be subjected to in this bout. Tiffany kissed Tirantes before the bout. Lots of mat wrestling early. Also editing. Thanks to the kiss earlier, Tirantes counted slow whenever Apache made a cover. Strangely, he wasn't counting a whole lot faster when Tiffany made covers. 2 big dives near the finish. Apache hit a high cross from the top rope to the floor and Tiffany hit a tope con hilo. Get this finish. Tiffany hit an iconoclasm and was about to get the pin with her feet on the ropes when Zorro hit the ring and gave Apache a rose for the DQ. I swear to God I'm not making this up. That was the worst finish in the history of wrestling. Electroshock and Abismo Negro ran out afterwards and hit Zorro with the longest 2x4 I've ever seen, and my dad builds fences for a living. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, Granda came in through the crowd and made the save for Zorro. I haven't seen enough of him to say for sure, but it's very possible that Granda is the single worst wrestler I've ever seen in my whole life. None of these things that I've reported here are exaggerations for those of you wondering. Electroshock and Abismo Negro cut a dastardly heel promo while standing outside in front of a Christmas tree. They were attacked by Los Payasos tricolor. This was so messed up. Evil clowns committing assault in front of a Christmas tree? Is nothing sacred? La Parca Jr. and Latin Lover and Hijo del Perro Arguello beat Electroshock and Hector Garza and Abismo Negro via DQ. Didn't we see the same main event the last 60 weeks in a row? In a hilarious spot, this lady in the crowd kept hitting Negro with her purse, so he grabbed it from her and began beating Lover with it. The lady was going crazy demanding her purse back. She was really going crazy when he returned it, because he did so by throwing it into the crowd. First fall was a total cluster. Garza faked a foul right in front of referee Copete Salazar, but since Salazar is a Rudo referee, he claimed it was real and awarded the bad guys the fall. Garza is awesome but has been so lazy recently doing his Pussy Hill gimmick. Lover pinned Negro to take the second fall. Lots of good wrestling in this one, except for one horribly messed up spot with Parca and Negro. Shock and Negro yelled at Garza afterwards for being such a coward. They forced him to work in the third fall by refusing to even stand on the apron for a tag. Near the finish he accidentally dropkicked Salazar. And he blatantly kicked Arguello right in the nuts and made the cover. Salazar woke up and counted the pin, but then Tirantes went over and DQ'd Garza. Salazar and Tirantes got into a shoving match and the Rudos turned on Garza and stomped a mudhole in him. Salazar decided to join in on the stomping, so Tirantes punched him out. I thought I was watching AAA. Wait, I am watching AAA. Tirantes and the Technicos cleared the ring to a big pop. Arguello is starting to look facially like his dad, which is not a good thing. First match wasn't much, but the main event was good, plus the show was only 50 minutes long, so overall a thumbs up. EMLL, December 25, 2001. The highlight of my week opened with a video package which included footage of a bird, a cat, a fish and a dog. I have no idea why. Negro Casas and Mr. Aguila Tilda, and Rey Mysterio Jr. and Hombre Sin Nombre beat Halloween and El Averno and Damien, 666 this week, and Mephisto. Have I ever mentioned that the EMLL ring announcer is the best announcer in the whole world? It was funny, because the stupidest fan with no Spanish-speaking ability whatsoever could have easily determined who the good guys and bad guys were. The Rudo team came out to this death metal song and just generally looked scary, not to mention one of them had 666 on his forehead, on Christmas night no less, while the clean-shaven babyface TIMECODES came out to Casas music, which is the happiest song in the world. Clearly one man did not fit here. Ray Jr. has the new worst hairdo in all of wrestling, and that includes Chuck Palumbo. His wrestling was awesome though. Aguila, who was Essa Rios in the WWF and just got released, of course looked better than 90% of that company's current roster. WWF is so WCW lately. Ray is still good enough that he can F up a spot and save it in mid-move. Rios pinned Averno with a fat-ass 450 splash. Mephisto didn't do a thing in this fall, so it was really good. I think you can count on about one hand the number of guys in history that have ever been as good as Hombre in their first year. Halloween pinned him with a bulldog to take the second fall. Then they pinned everyone else for good measure. Mephisto did one high spot, ascended onto Aguila, and he came up short and damn near killed the guy. Rudos did some awesome double team moves in the third fall. Big train wreck spot. Casas ended up pinning Mephisto mercifully, with a La Magistral Cradle to get the win. A very good match overall. And no kendo stick. Blue Demon Jr. and Villano 3 and Villano V beat Mascara Año 2000 and Apollo Dantes and Cien Caras. Good guys came out to the Mission Impossible music. The mission, which they chose to accept, was to try to get a good match out of the Rudo team. Unfortunately, this mission proved to really be impossible. Demon Jr. sucked and Villano V has plummeted downhill, so it was all up to Villano 3, and he could not carry 5 other guys. V3 pinned Dantes to take the first fall even though Dantes was vigorously holding onto the bottom rope with both hands. Dantes complained to the ref afterwards, and he was right, that decision wasn't fair. What was even less fair was that this match continued. Bad guys killed V3 to take the second fall. The less said the better. 100 years later, this mercifully ended after Dantes unmasked V5. The Canciones Infantiles commercial aired, which features all these cute little kids dancing and singing happy Mexican songs. This is the greatest commercial ever. Veneno and Violencia and Hijo de Pierroth Jr. beat Brazo de Oro and La Fiera and Tigre Blanco. Technicos came out to the Looney Tunes music. I swear that's true. What the hell? Pierroth Jr. cut a promo before the match. I think he said it was Veneno's birthday today. I can't understand half of what he says, but I still love listening to his promos because his delivery is awesome. Oro is the not quite as fat brother of Super Porky. Porky clearly got all the charisma in the family. Bad guys utterly squashed them in the first fall. The callous destruction continued in the second fall. Good guys finally made a comeback and Oro pinned Boricua with a Hurricane Rana. That's not a typo. A Hurricane Rana. Big dive sequence in the third fall, including by Hijo de Pierroth Jr., who destroyed his ankle on a dive earlier this year. Speaking of Hijo, he has drastically cut down on the protein shakes lately. Bad guys pinned Oro to take the match, which made Pierroth Jr. very pleased. Scorpio Jr. and Dr. Wagner Jr. and Bestia Salvaje beat Black Warrior and Hombre Sin Nombre and Atlantis. Match was joined in progress in the second fall. My god, I had to watch an entire Mascara Año 2000 match and they clipped this up. Good guys took the second fall with a double pin, apparently to even things up. Wagner and Atlantis did the phoniest selling in history for a double clothesline spot, but Wagner is so awesome that I'll forgive him. Big double tope of doom with Warrior and Hombre in the third fall. It came down to Atlantis and Wagner, who have been feuding for hundreds of years. Wagner gave him a blatant, low blow behind the referee's back for the pin. Ungodly heat for that. Super Porky and Rayo de Jalisco and Mr. Niebla beat Ultimo Guerrero and Mascara Magica and Tarzan Boy. You should have seen the bumps Tarzan was taking for Porky's shoulder tackles. It was like he'd been propelled out of an ejection seat. Seriously, he was up above Porky's shoulder level. I'm trying to think of a less selfish heel in wrestling today and I don't think I can. Rayo pinned Guerrero to take the first fall. No, seriously. That is about the equivalent of someone with Vince McMahon's ability pinning someone with Kurt Angle's ability clean. Enormously depressing. I wonder what these guys like Guerrero must think having to sell for this guy. Probably the same thing I think, just in Spanish. In the most gravity-defying spot of the year, Porky did a backflip over Guerrero's back, then jumped in the air and did a complete 360. He squashed both Tarzan and Guerrero with a splash, then did an old-school bodybuilding pose. Bad guys got their revenge by putting Porky upside down in a headstand so Tarzan could dropkick him in the ample midsection. I am not making any of these spots up. Bad guys made Ryo submit to take the second fall. Justice. Porky gigged in the third fall. In the greatest feat of strength since Lex Luger hip-tossed Yokozuna on the USS Intrepid, Tarzan actually picked Porky up and gave him a legit body slam. Niebla did an assisted space-flying tiger drop onto Mascara on the outside. Even Ryo, with the help of God himself, did a dive from the top of the post onto Guerrero on the floor. This left Porky and Tarzan, who were feuding, in the ring together. Porky squished him with a sit-down splash, then put him in a rocking horse submission for the win. For those of you wondering, this was taped before their match at the pay-per-view, which is why Porky still had hair. Overall, a damn good show. SmackDown, December 27, 2001. Spike and Taz beat Dudley's clean. I knew I was in trouble when Michael Cole opened the show revealing that Spike was very familiar with the Dudleys. Stacy tried to distract Spike with her ass, so he bit it. No wonder he doesn't have a girlfriend. They got the heat on Spike forever. Taz finally made a fat-ass comeback with a myriad of extremely scary suplexes. Spike got the tag and ended up hitting Devon with the Dudley Dong for the clean-as-can-be pinfall. Holy shit. Nobody is going to believe me when I say this, but Taz and Spike could be a hell of a team, because Spike takes an awesome beating and Taz makes an awesome comeback. Of course, since this company has been mirroring WCW so much lately, that might mean they'll be buried for sure now. Vince strutted out in his usual pompous manner. Vince said he could understand how the fans might be angry about some of his decisions and antics over the past year. I assume he's talking about the XFL and the galloping ass spanking on Raw. Vince got so mad at the what? Chance that he left the ring and started walking to the back. A lot of good that did. Vince started thundering his New Year's resolutions when Flair came out. Flair said Vince should resolve to not make an ass out of himself in 2002. Vince threatened to knock Flair on his ass if he got out of line. Flair said he was going to take a moment to explain why he hadn't knocked Vince on his ass yet. He talked about all the problems he'd had with the NWA in the late 80s. As Vince smirked, Flair went on to say that all those times he claimed that the NWA was the greatest promotion in the world, he had been lying. Seriously, he said this. To the majority of fans this means nothing, but to those fans that quit watching wrestling when WCW folded and maybe gave the WWF one more chance when Flair came on board, well, it meant everything. Great move there, Vince, you pompous idiot. Your ego is going to kill this company someday. Jesus Christ, WCW is dead and buried, they will never oppose you again, so please, give it up already. You jackass. Anyway, Flair talked about how, after WrestleMania 8, he went backstage fully expecting Vince to tell him that he was the greatest wrestler of all time. Instead, Vince told him that every time he came close to greatness, he did something stupid and screwed it up. This is actually a true story. That match took place back when Vince was violently opposed to blading. I even remember a letter he wrote to Ted Turner one day calling Ted a barbarian for allowing the blade on his wrestling show. How times change. Flair, having bladed in approximately 10 million matches previously, went into business for himself and gigged during the match. Vince was so angry that he probably would have fired him if he'd been anyone else in the world other than Ric Flair. Flair said that he owed a lot to Vince for giving him a shot during his first WWF run, but ever since that day, he'd always wanted to ask him one question: who are you to tell me how to wrestle? I'm Ric Flair. Flair said Vince might be the greatest promoter of all time, but he would never talk down to Flair about wrestling. Flair said as half-owner, he was signing Vince to a match at the Rumble. Vince, in a line that made me want to punch him through the TV screen, asked what man had the balls to face him. Flair said, the next guy that knocks you on your ass. And then punched Vince out. I want you to know that I wrote this entire recap from memory, and it was easy, because I seriously watched this promo about 50 times in a row. Ric Flair is the greatest man in the whole world. After commercial, Cole tried to ruin the moment by claiming, with a straight face, that this was perhaps the most significant announcement that has ever been made. Someone called Tony Schiavone. Then Lawler said he might have to talk to George Bush about the problems between Vince and Flair. Who is writing these lines? Christian beat Rikishi via countout. Test brawled with Rikishi outside leading to the finish. I am so sick of Test. Poor Christian had to take the ass spot afterwards, but Test made the save with the kick of fear. Angle and Storm had a meeting backstage about how cool the two of them were. Of course, the gimmick is that they're the two most uncool guys in the whole company. What a total waste of talent. Jericho, wearing a pair of shorts that would have made the Warriors in AAA blush, cut a heel promo at poolside. He talked about how he was the bomb and everyone else sucked. This was exactly like one of the cornball promos we used to cut in our backyard promotion. It was so different that it was cool. Rock and RVD beat Angle and Storm. Turned into a very good match. RVD got the hot tag and ran wild. He hit the frog splash on Angle, but Storm broke it up. They actually did a second hot tag a few seconds later. Rock finally pinned Storm with the people's elbow. Angle spent half the match trying to avoid Rock, so they might be building up a program between the two. We've seen it a million times, but I'm willing to watch it at least 50,000 more. Trish beat Molly. Either Trish has improved greatly or Molly is the female version of Ric Flair. This was shockingly good. Jazz, who is fired, hit the ring afterwards and destroyed both women. Vince met with Undertaker and said he respected him an awful lot. He said it took a big, bad man to do what he did to the Hardys. Vince said he wanted Taker to do the same thing to Tajiri. And he said if Tori interfered, Taker knew what to do. Undertaker beat Tajiri. Tajiri is always billed as being from Japan. Apparently, that is a city in Asia somewhere. Nick Patrick, who is fired, was referee for this match. Tajiri sprayed the green mist while they were outside the ring, but it was ultimately to no avail. With the green mist on, Taker looked just like the Grinch. How festive. Undertaker got the win with the Dragon Sleeper. No, seriously. Ultimo Dragon's career is rolling over in its grave. On the positive side, at least Undertaker finally beat someone via submission. Not an absolute total squash, but hardly competitive. Big Show hit the ring afterwards to make the save for Tajiri. Oh God, no. That is the last feud in the whole entire world that I want to see. After commercial, Show was slobbering in the ring. He said he was pissed at Undertaker for always picking on smaller guys. Why don't you come out here and pick on someone your own size? Said Show. What a bully that Show is. Always picking on smaller guys. Taker, green face and all, returned. Of course, since he's a heel now, he refused to fight and just walked to the back. Flair and ARN Tilda had a meeting backstage. Flair said after all these months, he was finally going to kick Vince's ass. Try 1 month, dude. Suddenly, Steph arrived. She had her straight hair going. She said she had a proposition for Flair. She said he should hire her back because she could really help him out against Vince. He said he wasn't hiring anyone right now, particularly any McMahons. She got bitchy and said he was incredibly stupid for not hiring her. She said her husband was coming back January 7th, and if Flair didn't hire her back, there were going to be big problems. He said he'd think about it. You'd better. She said. Why is she on my TV again? Edge beat Kane. Edge was horrible here and Kane wasn't much better. Get this finish. Edge went for the DDT and almost took Kane's mask off in the process. Kane, trying desperately to put his mask back on, walked right into a spear for the pin. Something is up with Kane because he's been doing a ton of jobs lately. I understand that Edge is tall with big white teeth and long blonde hair, and I have nothing against him, but there are other guys more deserving of the big push right now. And I'm not talking about Test. Big Boss Man, seriously, and Booker T beat Steve Austin. Big Boss Man wrestled in a dress shirt and slacks. I wonder what one-man gang is doing nowadays. This was horrible even in edited form, and it was heavily edited. In fact, there was so much editing that it started hurting my brain. For example, at one point Booker threw Austin into the ropes and hit him with a clothesline. But during this one spot, they cut to a different camera angle 3 times. Somehow, even though Booker threw Austin north to south, in the second camera angle he was running east to west. It was the craziest thing I ever saw. Booker ended up pinning Austin with a jumping kick. I can't believe I'm watching Big Boss Man on SmackDown and not Kaz Hayashi. There is no justice in this world. Best of the WWF 2001 Raw, December 31, 2001. This was a repeat show, so I didn't bother to watch it. They polled fans on WWF.com and aired the 10 most requested matches of the year. For those of you who didn't see the show, here were the final results from number 10 down to number 1. Benoit vs. Jericho in the ladder match from Royal Rumble, Undertaker vs. Triple H from WrestleMania, Angle vs. Shane from King of the Ring, Benoit and Jericho vs. Triple H and Austin from San Jose, Stacy vs. Tori in the lingerie match from No Mercy God. Wrestling fans are hard up. They could have watched the awesome Angle vs. Austin wrestling match from SummerSlam again, but instead, they had to see these two in their underwear for the 10 millionth time. Is porn really that inaccessible? 10-man elimination match from Survivor Series: RVD vs. Jeff Hardy from Invasion, Austin vs. Rock from WrestleMania, TLC match from WrestleMania, and Triple H vs. Austin from No Way Out. Frank A. Gotch's Flying Mare Wrestling Newsletter. Happy New Year! An editorial by Frank A. Gotch, World's Champion Wrestler. Good day, beloved readers, it is I, Frank A. Gotch, World's Champion Wrestler, here to wish you all a very happy New Year. As you might have noticed by the above epithet and accompanying snapshot daguerreotype, I have peddled the rights to my old newsletter, Flying Mare Weekly, to Mr. Alvarez. In return, Mr. Alvarez has remunerated to me the generous sum of $100, which should keep me in fine imported wines and thick cuts of red meat the rest of my days. I published 23 issues of this glorious newsletter in the year of our Lord, 1898, and former readers will surely experience fits of rapture upon seeing its return. Wonderful things are afoot for the new year, and I wish you all sunshine, good fortune and cock-a-hoop. Hogan attacked by 24-inch python. Sydney, Australia. Superstar wrestler Hulk Hogan was in satisfactory condition at Sydney Adventist Hospital Monday after being attacked on a sightseeing tour by a 24-inch python. The incident occurred when Hogan, real name Terry Bollea, ignored the repeated warnings of tour guide Jim Cognac and attempted to pick the snake up. That was a bad move, said Cognac, 35. Frightened pythons, while non-venomous, are apt to constrict around the body of an attacker, and unfortunately, Mr. Hogan attempted to put the snake around his neck. Hogan, 46, said he was trying to mimic the in-ring antics of former wrestling star Jake the Snake Roberts. Jake used to put those snakes around his neck all the time, brother, Hogan told reporters. But this snake was one bad dude. Hogan added that the incident gave him a newfound respect for snakes. Triple H loses parking spot to Chris Jericho. Stamford, CT. The spot had been his for years. Every morning, WWF wrestler Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who wrestles as Triple H and the Cerebral Assassin, arrived early to Titan Towers to make sure his parking spot was secure. Tuesday, Chris Jericho, who recently won the WWF's Unified Championship, finally stole that spot. My spot was so important to me, said Hunter in an exclusive interview. I've been trying to keep that damn Jericho out of my spot for years. I'd show up early, or I'd have someone else park there the night before and save it for me. One time I even took chalk and drew a wheelchair in the spot to make him think it was for the handicapped. Hunter said he lost the spot thanks to a tanning session gone awry. I was booked at 5 a.m. right when the gym opened, but one of the employees went in early and I couldn't get in until 5:22. I hauled ass out of there after I was done, but that fucking Jericho had already arrived. Hunter added that he would do whatever it took to get his spot back.